what I've always had in my mind is I want to be stronger than Iowa.
Well, I love New Hampshire, and they love me. Have a good time, everybody.
Where are you going?
Two candidates, 3 hours to go until the first polls close in New Hampshire, and a lot is on the line as both candidates, Nikki Haley and former President Donald Trump, making their final campaign appearances. I'm Kevin Surley, and welcome to America's Vote 2024, the New Hampshire primaries. Joining us now from New Hampshire, Nashua, New Hampshire, is Matt Bartlett. Matt is one of the most plugged-in Republican strategists, not just in New Hampshire, but in the nation. Matt, thanks for joining us. I reckon you're in Nashua's Castro Cigar Lounge, so I appreciate you taking a little bit of a breather on this primary day. And one of the things that you've been so excellent and out front on is this notion of independent voters. And they can vote in a New Hampshire primary. Are they a shoo-in for Nikki Haley, or actually might they give Trump a boost?
Boy, you hit that right on the head here. New Hampshire is famous for its independent streak, even a libertarian streak to us. And let's just be clear. Democrats can only vote today in the Democratic primary. Republicans can only vote today in the Republican primary. But independents, of which we have 40% of the voting population here today in New Hampshire, can choose to go any which way they want. Independent voters are not moderate voters, maybe not even centrist voters. It tends to be much more about a feeling than an ideological persuasion. So yes, they typically break whichever way they want. In 2000, they went for McCain. Actually, in 2016, they actually voted for Donald Trump. We're going to find out if those independent voters stay with him, or maybe we've had enough of him, and if Nikki Haley can maybe outpass the former president with those independent voters.
You know, back on the campaign trail in 2016, I remember speaking to a lot of folks who were trying to decide up in New Hampshire whether or not they were going to vote for Bernie Sanders or for Donald Trump. Might this election, flash forward to 2024, those voters be deciding between RFK and Donald Trump?
Boy, again, another great question. And you hear RFK being mentioned by a lot of the Trump voters, by a lot of people who know the Kennedy name. That could always be a factor. He is not on the ballot tonight. He has signaled his intention to be a third-party candidate, and that could certainly play into the general in those swing states in what looks to be, you know, if Donald Trump gets a nomination, a very, very divided and hard-fought general.
Well, speaking of that, New Hampshire also loves an upset, right? You go all the way back to 1960 when JFK, John F. Kennedy Jr., won that New Hampshire primary for the Democrats. You mentioned the late, great Senator John McCain. And then obviously you look into 2016, or right before then, Hillary Clinton winning New Hampshire, beating Obama in that, launching a long series of the Democratic primary. 2016, the first time Trump had won a political victory after losing Iowa to Senator Ted Cruz. How might that psychology of an upset impact tonight's decision for New Hampshire?
Yes, New Hampshire lore there. You know, it is yet to be seen what happens. In 1992, Bill Clinton came in second place in New Hampshire, declared himself the comeback kid, and the rest is history. Flash forward, his wife, you know, coming out of Iowa, 10-point gap in the polls, and she pulls off a stunning win in New Hampshire that kept her alive for quite a while. So New Hampshire was Clinton country up until 2016, when a relatively unknown neighboring senator, Bernie Sanders, really set the place on fire. Feel the burn in cold New Hampshire. He won here. So again, 2016 delivered Donald Trump his first win, and it's very possible that tonight New Hampshire could deliver him what could be the final win in this nomination process.
Matt, I got to be honest with you. I was speaking earlier with Scott Tranter over at the Decision Desk HQ, and we were talking about the delegates. And should Trump win tonight by a big margin, his path to 1,215 delegates, the threshold that he would need, is in pretty good standing. What is the justification for the Haley campaign to continue moving forward on a delegate track? We always talk about momentum. It's important, but it's really important to get the momentum for the delegates. How does she justify staying in this race if she loses tonight?
The old country song, if we can make it through tonight, we'll worry about tomorrow. It is unclear what Nikki Haley's path to the nomination is right now. If in a few hours she pulls off one of the biggest upsets and stuns not just New Hampshire, but the nation, and either beats President Trump or comes in a very close second, then you have a race. And then I think you will see millions of dollars coming off the sidelines. You will see the national press corps really paying attention to this race. She will get further scrutiny, further attention, further excitement. Conversely, if she does not, it will be all the more challenging. Going into her home state where Donald Trump has a, 20-point lead at least, and there will be calls, which already started today on Fox News. She did an interview, calls for her to drop out. Right now, it is very odd in New Hampshire that you have the coalescing of around Donald Trump and what feels to be a general election field. You have many people from Tim Scott to J.D. Vance, Elise Stefanik, others that are coming here to show support for the former president and really try to unite the party in a very early part in the time in the nomination process.
Matt Bartlett, where did the Bush Republicans vote?
It's very possible that the Bush Republicans left the party about 10 years ago, or they too changed their mindset. It's an odd time where we're still in the aftermath of that 2016, the political tectonic shifts, plates have shifted. The parties have been rearranged, blue collar versus college educated. And we'll see where, the old traditional Yankee or Bush Republicans, if they maintain the Republican Party, especially against Joe Biden, or if they continue to say Donald Trump is not our man.
Well, let me press you on this, Matt Bartlett, because as a Republican strategist, the notion that Nikki Haley, if she comes within single digits tonight of Trump, that she can have some type of justification for her campaign moving forward when she's down 20 percentage points, according to the polls in her state of South Carolina. Is finishing second, even if it's in single digits, enough to to ignite a conversation? Even if it's in single digits, I just got to be honest with you. When I talk to all of my sources, just the operation in terms of the effort to mobilize voters, whether it's the Nevada caucus or Super Tuesday states, Trump is light years away in terms of an operation to mobilize. She'd have to move very quickly, and it would be very costly, would it not?
Absolutely correct. It would, if she were to pull off a stunning upset tonight, you would have a chance at a race. But let's also remember that national polling tends to be a lagging indicator. And the actual results of these elections in Iowa or in New Hampshire are much more of a leading indicator. We saw in previous elections how Hillary and Rudy were going to be the presumptive nominees, even Jeb Bush in some national polling. I believe Joe Biden was at one point down to not just Bernie Sanders, but even behind Elizabeth Warren. So if you have a victory, if you have an upset, if there is a perceived notion of momentum, that leads to further national traction. That is certainly not a guarantee. Even if you are correct, Kevin, even if she were to win New Hampshire, win it resoundingly, it is still a very, very steep mountain to climb in the face of Donald Trump.
I was talking to a source on the Haley campaign earlier this week, specifically about how she's now trying to position herself as an outsider to Trump's Republican Party, and that Trump is the establishment, right? And we've seen that in her closing pitch to voters. She had a very, very powerful ad about with the mother of the survivor of the North Korea of the American who was killed by North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. But she's really started to position herself as an empathetic outsider, and the source that I was speaking with saying that that's really the objective in the closing argument. But the reason I mention that is you look at a state that has been so behind Trump, dating all the way back to 2016. He trial ballooned his political career even a decade or so before that in New Hampshire. So his relationships are just so embedded that I just got to be blunt. Are we overthinking this thing? You look at every poll, immigration's beating the economy. Immigration is Trump's strongest issue. Number two is the economy, and that's Trump's second strongest issue amongst Republicans. So has she been successful up there in Castro's where you are in positioning herself as a political outsider?
I don't think so. I think you are correct. It would have been wise to be, an underdog mentality really the outsider. Every endorsement that Donald Trump got, she should have been hammering him on that. That is political 101. But the notion, let's just be clear, this is also the weirdest dynamic that we've seen in a presidential cycle. And it is unclear if anybody in this race could have beaten Donald Trump had they run a different race, a better race, or if anybody who didn't choose to run this time could have beaten Donald Trump. Donald Trump is loved by the base. And the only thing I would say is that there was a question around his electability maybe a year ago. In fact, Ron DeSantis was leading the polls in New Hampshire, actually beating Donald Trump in January of 2023. What have we seen for the past 6 months? Head-to-head matchups between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, where Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden in some of the swing states. That is one of the most underreported psychological effects that the Republican electorate is very empowered by, is very emboldened by, excited by, and they are. It has truly made this race almost virtually unwinnable for anyone else.
Nikki Haley's closing argument was she's a political outsider and that Trump's the insider. Donald Trump's closing argument was the death penalty for drug cartels. It's about to get weird. Matthew Bartlett, I'm going to quote you on that. Thank you so much for joining us. Matthew Bartlett, Republican strategist, up there live in a cigar lounge in Nashua, New Hampshire, Castro's, if you've ever been there. That's it for me. I'm Kevin Cirilli, and we will see you back here next hour with another update on America's Vote 2024.